We have been given stories of children who have been really upset by the way they've been treated, by the parish priest coming in, saying something to them, flicking holy water on them, by the little kids.
Who's flicking holy water on them?
I can show you the emails.
Yeah.
Or you see, it's all. You see, this is the thing. If there is a norm and it's not seen as abnormal, how do you change it?
Hello and welcome back to The Mothership, the show that brings the issues that matter most to Irish families to the table. I'm Laura Cunningham, and on this week's show we're asking, does religion still have a place in Irish schools? Joining us this week from Education Equality is Alison Moore. Thank you for joining us. TV and radio presenter Luca Fuelon. Luke, welcome back.
Thank you.
And author and screenwriter Caroline Grace-Cassidy.
Thanks, Laura.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us. So this is a topic that I have wanted to cover for a good while. As it stands in Ireland, roughly 88% of schools are still under the patronage of the Catholic Church. So I guess the question is, as we become more of a pluralist society, does that still make sense? So Alison, I'm going to come to you first. Tell us a little bit about education equality first and what you've done so far and what you're currently working on.
Education Equality was set up in 2015. It's a parent-led human rights group, completely run on a volunteer basis. When it was set up, its twin goals, as we call them, were equal access and equal respect. Equal access in terms of that non-baptised or children of other religions could access the Irish school system, because at the time there was the baptism barrier, and it was seen that you had to baptise your child in order to get your name up far enough up the list to get the kid in school, which is a huge concern for parents. Obviously, the baptism barrier is now thankfully repealed. It's been removed, and all children, in theory, have access to the schools. Many schools still ask, is your child baptised, and ask for proof of baptism. So that's another argument. But second goal, equal respect. We believe that all children in Ireland should be afforded the same experience, the same level of respect in schools, and not to be made feel different or other. So that's what we are continuing to campaign on at the moment.
Okay. And we'll just look at, so I suppose, where we are at the moment. So as we said, 88% of schools are still under the patronage of the Catholic Church. 6% are Protestant. 2.6 together are Educate Together school. 2.6% I should say. Which, you know, we often hear when we talk about this issue on her family, you know, well, if you don't want to go to Catholic school, just send them to an Educate Together school. But obviously that's not an option for many, many people. 2% are Gael Scoilna, 0.4% are state schools, or ETBs as they're now known, formerly known as vocational schools, which on paper are multi-denominational, but I know there is a little bit of a query around that as well. And then 0.9% are other, so your Jewish schools, etc. We know now, that the Catholic Church has promised to divest hundreds of schools from its patronage. I think the target is 400 schools by 2030, is that right?
Yeah.
And as it stands, 12 have been divested as such. So
in 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, the divestment process, or reconfiguration as the Department of Education are now calling it, has been like a abject failure.
Okay.
I don't think anyone can stand over it. Mm-hmm. The whole system, I think from the outset, was doomed to failure. There was never any interim targets. There was no oversight. It's just been a very slow process. The Catholic Church itself, in fairness to them, have said that this needs to happen, and that it needs to happen faster. But it just is. It's just not a process that we think is going to be successful or deliver the outcomes. One school has been
divested so far this year, so I mean that's not great.
No, it's not. But what education equality contends is that there's a very easy solution in the interim, which is to make faith formation an opt-in class outside of core school hours. So everyone, the class finishes, the teacher comes, says goodbye, kids go. The ones that want to go, or the parents who want their children to go to faith formation, just stay for an extra half hour, or I think it's half hour per day. Yeah. And then the other kids go home. So there's never any segregation or, the kids, you don't listen to this bit. Mm-hmm. This is not for you.
And that is the way it is at the moment, of course.
That's what happens at the moment.
Well, it is a little, if I can just bump in there. I have a 10-year-old who's in primary school, so she would be sort of confirmation, communion, generation, or in the last few years. Within her class, there's 5 children who are of different religions, I suppose. And it's just an argument that I hear a lot. And while I'm completely for equality and for everything that you've talked about in regards to Catholics in schools, and thank God the baptism bar has been banished and all that kind of stuff, I do think that our teachers are from a younger generation.
Yeah.
I think they recognise the fact that they do not want to isolate children who may be Muslim, who may be Jehovah's Witness, who may be Jewish. So there is a real sense of how can we bring these kids into the sort of celebration. Okay, I sort of take religion out of the communions and the confirmations. They do just become celebrations for the kids. But I do see that younger teachers within Catholic schools are really working hard, and I think they deserve the credit for that. They're really working hard to make sure that it's not like you're saying, sorry, you're not in this, you're not involved in this. I can only speak from the schools that my kids are in, but that doesn't happen to the level that it once absolutely horribly did. So
that's really, really positive to hear.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess one of the concerns is that it's so school by school or maybe teacher dependent.
Yes.
You might have a teacher that's quite progressive or you might not. It's a bit potluck at the moment. So Luke, you and I come at this from a reasonably similar perspective in the sense that we were both educated in a very Catholic situation. But I don't want that from my son, and I know that you chose to send your daughter to an Educate Together school. What are the differences you see there from the way you were educated and the way Edie is?
Religion. What a great topic. I had a bit of a mixed feeling with my experience with religion in schools because I went to so many of them. So I think I went to 11 schools.
Wow.
I know, it's not a competition. But
if it was, you won.
If you're planning to send your kid from Clonturf to the Bog Road when he's 11, maybe don't do that because he's going to rebel. And so I got expelled a few times, and I got to experience a lot of different.
You've seen it all, so.
I have, right? I got to experience a lot of different teaching styles, and like you were saying, you really do remember the good ones. The bad ones, unfortunately, they stick with you too. So I was kind of determined when I had a little girl 11 years ago, that we were going to sort of agree upon a few things, like, for instance, she wasn't baptised.
Yeah.
And that was because, there was all this pressure, like you were saying, to baptise your child because your parents or your grandparents did it. Well, I was like, well, hang on a second. How does things change unless you change first? Because if you just keep repeating the thing, you're never going to get anywhere. So I was like, cool. So we agreed on that. And also an Educate Together school we managed to get her in Blessington, which is fantastic. Absolutely brilliant school. So I ended up getting more information from her than I learned in my million schools that I went to. She was telling me about Sikhism, and a girl in her class was Muslim or whatever it was. So I was getting information from her, which is great.
That's fantastic.
So that's what I think we kind of. It's a bit of a weird. I don't think anybody fully knows. We just have our own experience, and you have your statistics, but it's a bit of a weird situation we find ourselves in where
there's also, look, I think an awful lot of children in Catholic schools whose parents don't want them in Catholic schools.
Absolutely.
Like, for example, like in our catchment area, like I couldn't get my child into the local school. Like there's just no way. So they have to go to school. You have to educate them. So if it's only so same with Educate Together, you couldn't get in. So your choices are very limited. You don't have this great ability to kind of, look at this school and see what that's like, or that school and see what that's like. Because living in Dublin with small kids, they get into the school they get into.
They do, absolutely, and that's a position that I'm probably going to find my,
Do you have to pretend, that you're a practicing Catholic?
No, I mean, that barrier is gone, but, Alison was saying that they still do ask, so you would ask, is there any discrimination still going on there? I really don't know.
I contend that as somebody who was applying to a school, if they asked me that, I'd be like, why are they asking me that? And then they say, we don't use that information. Well, then why are you asking
then you're not having it.
After you've offered a place,
Yeah.
ask it if you feel you need to. That would be.
So looking at the census in 2011, 84.2% of people said that they were Catholic. In 2016, it was still 78.3%. So that's a minority, or that's a majority, So it's easy for us to sit here and say schools shouldn't be Catholic, but those numbers, But is that truly representative? So we surveyed our readers, as we often do before the show, to get a bit of an idea of where we're all at. Firstly, we simply asked, should Irish schools remain under the patronage of the Catholic Church? 78% said no, which was an overwhelming majority. However, when we asked if their children have or will make their communion or confirmations, 75% said yes.
So what is that about?
Yeah.
Would you wonder if the children weren't attending a Catholic school, would the answer be the same?
Well, of course, that's a huge element. So it's like that, do we?
Self-fulfilling chicken and egg.
They won't change until the system changes, perhaps. So we also asked which of these three options best describes your family. Adults and children are both practicing Catholics. They're all practicing Catholics. That was only 7%. Adults and children are not practicing Catholics. That was 21%. Adults are not practicing Catholics, but the children are in Catholic school and will make the sacraments, 72%. Yeah. So people are no longer subscribing to this, but their kids are. Now, I mean, this isn't, this is a social media straw poll and isn't scientific by any stretch, but it is a huge, demonstration of how, of the gap between what people are saying and what they believe and what they're actually doing. In everyone's defence, though, and I completely, appreciate this, when we ask them why, the majority of the answers were that they don't want their child left out. A lot of people said that it was just a big coming of age moment, and it was just an important milestone, and everyone else was doing it, and they want to do it. I completely appreciate that as well.
Have a less religious moment to
this
celebrate
is
your
it.
coming of age.
There's, what's become quite mainstream now is a naming day or naming ceremony instead of a christening. It's a secular christening, essentially.
But just with no
A welcome, a recognition.
Just have family and friends around. To sort of,
They might say a few words rather than prayers. Some people plant a tree. It's a christening under any other name, really.
But I think you're right, Laura. I think it's this idea that we need to move on with exactly, Luke had a brilliant point. Yes, you don't want to say to kids, you're not going to make a communion. Take religion out of it, right? It's like the Debs. It's, so, but if there was something else, say in 5th class, that it was like, yes, you all get dressed up in a pink dress or you get dressed up in a yellow dress. And, if there's something else that just takes the religion out of it. Because I know
there are options. There are primary school graduations that some schools hold.
There's Montessori graduations, for God's sake.
Exactly.
But I know my kids making communion confirmation didn't connect it with Catholicism and religion. They didn't make that connection whatsoever. The only connection they made was getting a nice dress, going to Little Caesars, going to Nando's and making money. That's all that they thought that those two things meant.
And from your perspective, with your kids in a Catholic school, would it have been very difficult for you to say, guys, we're not religious, so we're not going to do that. We'll do this other thing on the day? Would that have been a very big deal?
Yeah, that would have been a very big deal. I suppose, the school that my kids I went to, it's a Catholic school. We are Catholics, we're not practicing Catholics, but I think all their friends that they'd sort of started to and from school, they were all doing it. And I just think, and like I say, never once did we say, I don't know, what is it? Are they forgiven their sins for communion? I can't remember. But never once did we say as a family, this is what this is about. It was always about the dress and where you were going and having the day out.
But do you accept, though, that is what it is actually?
Yeah, I totally accept
So you
that.
are, you're subscribing to that.
I'm subscribing to that 100%.
Is it not a bit weird to say, bluntly, that we're Catholics but we don't practice it? Is that like saying, I'm a vegan but I eat meat all the time?
No, I don't think so. I mean...
What is it to be...
It's cultural.
Do you mean you're Christian but not Catholic?
I mean, Christian, I suppose, my granny, my great-granny, it's sort of like a family thing that I don't overly think about it. Same the way I don't think about I'm Reese negative blood. I don't really think about it. It doesn't... Are you
a cultural Catholic?
No, well, I mean, I just say we don't go to mass. I believe in kindness. I believe in a lot of things that, Catholicism, I think is awful. I believe in marriage equality.
What do you believe in? Tell us now.
Repeal. I would be a spiritual person. I think, I think if you can just be kind and live a nice, kind life, I think that's your religion in a nutshell. But I think because I live in where I live and my kids go to that kind of school that they do, you have to kind of just not let it just get too, don't get too mad about it, I suppose. And like I say, because the teachers are so much younger now in these schools, I don't see the same ramming stuff down your throat that I saw when I went.
If I could just come in there, just to ask you, if your children hadn't gone to a Catholic school, if you had the option of a local school nearby where they wouldn't be indoctrinated and put through the sacraments, would you have chosen to do that outside of school?
Good question.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Whatever our nearest school would have been the school that they were going to attend. So there's one Educate Together beside us now, which is fantastic. But we'd know.
But if they hadn't been all my friends are they're making their communion, would you have taken an extra step to put them through doing communion?
Oh no, God! Yeah. Oh no, absolutely not.
Because then they wouldn't have been.
Yeah, exactly.
Othered.
Yeah, it's about them not feeling left out. Yeah. Sorry,
so
where they are.
That is education equality's whole contention. Yeah. That if you want your kids to do sacramental preparation, I think absolutely you're right.
No, that wouldn't be.
And I think your position is really understandable, and it's also a very popular stance, which is why we kind of are where we are. People are like, look, there's no problem.
Exactly.
There's no harm.
That is why we are saying it. Yeah, 78% of people said no, they don't practice religion, but the kids are going to make their communion, their confirmation.
Absolutely, that is the majority.
That's
what my point.
That is exactly it.
Forgetting, the whole reason that it's a bit of a touchy subject is because of the history of religion and the horrible things that have happened in this country specifically to our parents' parents' generation, and we seem to be just like clinging on to these, like, okay, well, they can practice religion after the school, and you can just sit there and everyone else goes out and play, and you stay there and you can do the religion thing because your parents are forcing you to do it because you go home and they go, what you learn in school, was it religious? Like, is it not just a little bit strange that we're still sort of clinging on to this like bygone era?
This is it, right? So for me, and I know, Alison, you feel the same, you nearly have to feel really strongly against this in order to opt out of it. You know, it isn't like option A or option B. It's kind of like, this is the way, or you're a bit of a renegade. You know what I mean?
And so people don't care enough about religion anymore to go into those depths. A lot of people don't. A lot
of people don't want their choice to affect their child in school. They say it's not fair. And as we're talking about people with different personalities, some children will be quite happy to be different and to be doing something different to their friends. Others will not, and they will feel singled out, or they will feel they're being treated differently.
But what if those people grow up then and ask their parents, like, why did you, I'm completely not what you were asking me to learn in school.
No, that's a whole argument. It's definitely a whole argument. But as I said, education equality is just saying, if we could just take the religion out of core school hours, not taking it away from anyone who wants to do it.
I think that's
but
worse,
make it
I think what he's
make
saying
it
is
opt
right.
in.
No.
Make it opt. But how can it be worse if you're forcing kids to sit in a class and listen to their teacher, who you tell them, oh, listen to your teacher, you know, do as you're told.
Any parents say that, listen about religion.
Well,
I know,
but that's hypocrisy. But you're telling your kids, listen to the teacher.
That's Ireland.
But do we not want to fix it? Do we not want to make it better? Do we not want to?
I think.
But like, it's easy for us to laugh here, but like, we have been given stories of children who have been really upset by the way they've been treated, by the parish priest coming in, saying something to them, flicking holy water on them, by the little kids.
Who's flicking holy water on them?
I can show you the emails.
Thing,
Or you see, it's all. You see, this is the thing. If there is a norm and it's not seen as abnormal, how do you change it?
On that, you know, we talk about opting out, and again, from readers we'd often hear, but you can opt out, it's fine. But Alison, you made a really good point before about how if we were segregating a number of children in a classroom for any other reason than this, it would be outrageous. Maybe it was based on their race or because they were a member of the travelling community or anything else like that. That would be unacceptable.
Children get segregated every day. Like, my kids would need extra help with maths, so like a couple of them have to come out. And it's like, oh, why do I have to go out? You know, I'm just trying to say within a classroom now.
But you can see that's not ideal.
It's not.
So if we can have that,
and many schools don't do that anymore. They have the within the classroom that they'll have the special needs teacher go sit beside them for a few minutes and work with them rather than bring them out of the classroom. So I remember that when I was in school, I remember the kids, they're the poor kids.
Know,
you know,
you do,
it's wrong, you know, it's othering again.
Yeah. So I went to a Catholic school, and there was very few people that were opting out. And, you know, I mean, one of them was my very best friend, and it didn't bother her in the slightest because she just was like, it's interesting. She would join in religion class. It was all we'd debate about things, and she would obviously...
Well, you may go to mass.
Oh, yes, absolutely,
That's
everything was religious.
Age where you've got some kind of ability to reason, but
she was secondary
small
school.
Kids take everything their teacher says to them as being
Gospel.
fact. Yeah, gospel,
Literally
exactly.
gospel,
It's being fact. So then they come home and they tell you, oh, teacher said such and such thing, and they go, well, we don't believe that. And
That's the thing. I mean,
why,
being taught about science on one hand, and then the next day being taught about transubstantiation and the Immaculate Conception. To me, that's just...
And we haven't even talked about the sex education part of the whole thing,
Well,
which
I'm
is just a
getting to it.
minefield. Like, we were literally just skipping the surface here.
So I actually wanted to touch on that. Now, this is a small minority of Irish schools that are doing this, but as many of you are aware, the Catholic Church has its own RSE programme or sex education programme, and a school can opt to use it. It's called Flourish. A small number of schools in Ireland do. My fear is that I would send my child to a school who have decided to use this. Again, this is the extreme end of the thing. So this isn't happening everywhere, but it is happening. So this is for 6th class, so 12-year-olds-ish, when they're being taught about where babies come from. Yeah, the stork. In order for the egg to become fertilised, a man and a woman must be very intimate with each other. This couple know that they may become parents of a child, and this is really important and a demanding job. Fair enough.
Well, so far.
Sexual intercourse is something that feels good, but there is much more to it than that. In order to bring a wonderful child into the world, a couple need to be committed to staying together and doing their best for the child. Oh, lovely. A married couple, as part of their wedding vows, promise to welcome children into their lives. They receive God's blessing on their commitment to each other. We ask God's help as we learn about love, commitment, and the miracle of new life. Amen. So,
But it's man and woman, though. It's
all right.
oh no, let's break it down. Let's break it down.
Oh, okay.
It's, first of all, amen. That's a prayer. So you're learning your sex education through a prayer. It's taught to 12-year-olds who probably already know what sex is, let's be honest. The things that we learn in that are it's a man and a woman, that they must be married, that they must stay together, and that if you're married, you promise God that you're going to have children. So what's left out is gay couples.
If you do have children, it's because you're blessed. So therefore, people maybe who don't or can't have children.
Love God.
I knew that when you were reading out the sentence. I know I'm
This is
realising
what
how bad
I'm
it sounds.
hypersensitive to this. So what it doesn't include is gay couples, single or solo parents of either sexual orientation, non-binary parents, God literally forbid, or married couples who decide not to have kids. Like, that's not okay, apparently. So what my fear, if my child ended up in that scenario, how's he going to feel as the child of a single parent? A child in the class whose parents are gay, a child who has like a solo mom by choice, anyone that isn't a traditional family is left out of that.
It's hard to believe that that's been
that's not even the worst.
I mean, that's
No, and I mean, it's important to say that the vast majority of Catholic schools don't use flourish. And there is another, I think it's the Accord one, isn't it, that a lot of people use.
Which is still very problematic.
It is, because it's just completely exclusionary. There's
not
no mention of same-sex relationships.
Influence.
Yeah. Absolutely no mention of people being trans. There's just nothing in there. You could make the argument that that's for parents to teach their kids, and that's fine.
I was going to say, do you not think kids would just not care that the school isn't teaching about something
But
specific?
does that still mean that it's something our state should be sponsoring?
No, absolutely not.
These are state-funded
It's
schools.
wasted time. It's literally wasted messages.
But I think like that, that kind of stuff is just dripping. It's hanging on by its disgusting old Catholic fingernails, and it won't last. I mean, within my kids' class, the amount of the blended families, all the different families, and they're completely that's just normal. Yeah. It is normal.
Again, like going on the child's personality, some of them will not care. They won't listen to this, but there will be one or two that are sitting there going, what's wrong with my family?
I was the only person in my class whose parents weren't together, and yeah,
that's incredible.
I'm very, very old.
Yeah, I had one person in my class.
Divorce it didn't exist when I was younger, so they were separated, but, that definitely made me feel a bit different or whatever. So I just think any small thing that makes you stand out when you're that age is difficult, isn't it? So, and I mean, like we say, a lot of this is handled so well by schools, beautifully. Like, you have to, hats off to the teachers, who many of whom are pretending to be Catholic to go and work in these schools.
Absolutely.
That's another point. But they handle it beautifully. But should they have to? Should we all be handling this, archaic situation, or should we just move on?
If you stop somebody on the street and said, do you think it's right that only Catholic teachers can work in 90% of the schools in Ireland, and then 6% Protestant, they wouldn't say, yes, that's okay. But that's the reality. A teacher who's going for a job in a Catholic ethos school must say that they will uphold the ethos of the school. They must teach faith formation through an integrated curriculum.
Yeah, it's discrimination, really, isn't it?
This is 2022.
Yeah.
And I think if we switch it on its head and say, okay, so tomorrow, 88% of the schools in Ireland are now Muslim, or they're now Jewish, and if people have a problem with that, just opt out.
Just say, if you will be told that there is no God, that's not, wouldn't be acceptable.
There is a little, like, I'm niggling in the back of my head here, there is a little bit of, like, the thought process of, okay, I am not just the self, I'm not just one person, there is maybe life after death, or what does it mean to be me, and all that stuff. That kind of does click into, religion, but that wanders into spiritualism, which I don't think is taught enough in schools.
No, me neither.
You either are doing the Catholic, Protestant, Muslim, but more like, what does it mean to be alive for the time that you're here?
Take the fear factor.
Philosophy.
Philosophy,
Like, children are terrified.
In other countries, they would start learning and talking about things like that very young, and I suppose that's a whole other argument.
Why can't we just move into that instead of like, oh, you need to go through this building and talk to this person who died 2,000 years ago, apparently.
But I mean, they're all doing yoga and mindfulness, and all of this stuff is coming into schools. And I think, let's be honest with you, we need the Catholic stuff to move aside to make space for, because they can't, on one hand, say, well, God and heaven and everything, and then, well, what do you believe? Well, they can. And
the curriculum provides for half an hour per day for faith formation, which not talking about religion, like instilling beliefs, like brainwashing of faith formation in children. Half an hour per day,
and then add in. Is that fair to say?
I'd have to really disagree with that.
That's the curriculum.
Well, it may be the curriculum, but it's not being practiced.
But again, that's an Irish fudge in some situations at best, and in others, you could get a teacher who goes the other way. So that's
this is my point. That's not a generation of teachers and educators.
They're actually risking You know, and when the priest comes in or the inspector comes in, they have to go back to the, you know, but they are risking their careers in doing that.
Why
you
not?
know,
Yeah.
You know, we have teachers involved in education equality who say, like, depending on what school you're in, like, you could not be out in a staff room.
Wow, really?
You can't. Some of them, they say they couldn't talk about their secular wedding because that would
we
out
have,
them
we have
as not
sports day and all
being
the teachers are in their rainbow
Catholic.
colours and they're like. So I see a totally different thing.
Again,
than you're saying.
very school. Dublin probably a little bit more open.
I suppose the only way to guarantee
Absolutely.
that it's all like that is for things to move on. And unfortunately, we are actually out of time. But thank you all so much for your contributions. I think it's a really good representation of where the country's at. You know, we
and
want
it's
it to
difficult
change.
for parents with kids because they're in a Catholic school. Well, they're not. They're like, you know. So there is all that sort of stuff going on as well. You know?
I mean, I suppose it's important to say that, like, you know, I personally completely understand why someone would just go with the status quo. You know what I mean? It is the system is the problem, not individuals who are, you know, absolutely not. So things are changing rapidly as we've seen. So hopefully it's only a matter of time before our education system does represent our more pluralist society. Let's see. But anyway, as I said, we're out of time. But thank you so much for everyone for coming in. As usual, we'll leave all the details of everything we spoke about under the video. It's going to be quite a lot, actually. I'm going to be a busy girl. But do get in touch about any of it, and we will see you next week.